I have always enjoyed climbing trees. One of my favorite trees to climb was a maple tree that my mother had planted. When she was a young woman, she found a maple leaf. And she took that maple leaf and she planted it in a flower pot. And when she and my father had their first property, a little 2-acre plot of land outside Chillicothe, she planted down over the bank this little maple tree. And it grew up straight and it grew strong. And as a teenager, I loved to take a pillow in one hand and a book in the other and just climb up in that tree and lie down and read a book as the wind would sway the tree back and forth. It's one of the most relaxing places for me to be as a teenager. And so I've always had a fondness for climbing trees. Even at an age where I'm a little heavier, a little older, and a lot less flexible. But despite that, one of my favorite stories about Jesus is about a guy who climbed a tree. His name was Zaccheus. Now, those of you who've been around churches, you've probably heard of Zaccheus and the song about him and everything, but the story is so short. It's found in Luke's Gospel, the 19th chapter, and it's the only time in the whole Bible that the name Zaccheus is ever mentioned. You see, Zaccheus was a tax collector in the city of Jericho. And Jesus was passing through Jericho on his way to Jerusalem. Now, he wasn't just heading to Jerusalem. He was heading to Jerusalem for the last time. Days later, there would be that triumphant entry that we've heard about. There would be the final Passover meal with his disciples. There would be a betrayal, a crucifixion, and a resurrection. But right now, he's passing through Jericho. And this tax collector is wanting to catch a glimpse of this one named Jesus. But the crowds are so large that he can't see him. So he runs ahead of the crowds, climbs up in a sycamore tree, and waits. Well, his waiting paid off. Jesus comes by, sees Zaccheus up in a tree, and says, "You, Zaccheus, come down from there quickly, for today I'm going to stay at your house." And so Zaccheus was overjoyed that he'd take notice of him. He did indeed come down quickly, as shall I. Oh boy. Two things bother me about all this. One thing, I really shouldn't be jumping out of trees anymore. That hurt. Gosh, did I mention heavier, older, less flexible? Second thing is, that old children's song that I enjoyed so much, it stopped before the story. I mean, if anyone reads this account and thinks that this is about a man climbing up in a tree to get to see Jesus, and then Jesus inviting himself over to his house for a meal, wow, we've missed the whole point altogether. The point of the story comes after Zaccheus comes out of the tree. You see, Zaccheus was a man living on the edge. Maybe we should be singing that old Aerosmith song or something. This was a guy who literally had had his life get off track and he really didn't realize it. Let's see if I can help clarify a little bit anyway. Zaccheus was collecting taxes. He wasn't collecting taxes for the Jews to build bridges and roads and railroads or schools or hospitals. He was collecting taxes for the Romans, the occupying military force in Jerusalem that had control of the land of Israel, the land of Judah. That's who he was collecting taxes for. So we have some grumbling going on when Jesus is heading to his house to have a meal. And this time, it wasn't the scribes and Pharisees. It didn't say the scribes and Pharisees grumbled. It said they. It said the people. The people all around this situation, this crowd that had been following Jesus, that was watching along this route, they're grumbling. They're like, wait a second. I thought this guy was all great. I thought he was some wonderful religious teacher. He's going to the house of a sinner to eat. Now, we really don't get the hospitality of that culture, and I don't get it, but I get it just a little bit. It wasn't just offering to have a meal, but it was also whose table you chose to eat at. So by Jesus going to someone's home and having a meal with them, there was a communication of graciousness that maybe wasn't expected by those who were children of Abraham or descendants of Abraham. Let me try to explain. Abraham's son Isaac, and Isaac's son Jacob, all of them were given a promise by God. That promise was that their descendants would multiply. They would be as the sands of the seashore, the stars of the sky. But also a promise of land, that there was land that God was going to give them, that he was going to give their descendants. That would be their land, for they would be his people and he would be their God. This land of Judah, the land of Israel at that time, that was a land that God had promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to all their descendants. So think again, we had the chief tax collector for the Roman military occupying force, who's also a descendant of Abraham. How messed up is that? He's living under the promise of God, yet living under the money and the wealth and power of Rome. A man on the edge indeed. And Jesus is going to his house to eat with all the other good people that were around. It really upset the crowd around him. Now, Zaccheus isn't immune to this. He hears this grumbling. He hears this complaining that's going on by the people. And he stands and tells Jesus, Lord, I'm going to give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I've defrauded anyone, I'm going to repay those people back 4 times as much. Jesus responds with something unexpected. He says, today salvation has come to this house. For this too is a child of Abraham. I want us to hear that. I want us to chew on it just a little bit, if you'll forgive the expression. Jesus goes on further to explain something about his mission. He says, the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Anyone else bothered by how easy this was? Zaccheus says that he's going to give half his possessions to the poor and that he's going to pay back 4-fold people he's defrauded. And Jesus says, salvation has come to this house. There was no sinner's prayer, there was no altar, there was no Apostles' Creed or denominational creed. None of that stuff. Just salvation has come to this house. That seems a little too easy, doesn't it? But yet, it really is. We've had this word that we've used in the church for some time. Repent. Do you know what the word actually means? To repent is to change your direction. To repent is to take the course that you are traveling on and to change it to another course, to another direction, towards another goal. That day, by experiencing Jesus, Zaccheus changed his course. He changed his direction. He repented. And I think for those of us who are church folk, and you know who you are, I'm church folk too, it makes us very uncomfortable. Because what if the grace and forgiveness, what if actual salvation really is that easy? And I understand, like I said, I'm a pastor. I really want things to lay down nice and neat and orderly so that I can know whenever someone's joining the church that they have a true relationship with Jesus Christ, that their life has been transformed. And in the end, I have to acknowledge that it really isn't as difficult as we've made it to be over the centuries. Once someone has encountered Jesus, if their life is changed by that encounter, then salvation has probably come to that house. Just that whole mission of Jesus is a little disconcerting, isn't it? What did he say his mission was? I mean, remember, again, I told you earlier, he was heading to Jerusalem for the last time. Here he is in the home stretch of his earthly journey. This is where things are coming to a head, and he says, the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Does the Son of Man's mission look like our mission in the church? Does it? I can't tell you how many churches have as their mission statement to make disciples of Jesus Christ. I sometimes wonder if we really get how big that is. That making disciples of Jesus Christ isn't necessarily having some church function in our church building and then wondering why the lost didn't come. I think Jesus set an example before us of one who is willing to take grumbling and ridicule for going to the places where those who needed him the most were. What if instead of waiting for people to come to us and realize they need Jesus, what if we actually came to the realization that we needed to come to them? That we needed to get to know who they were, that we needed to take the time to get to know them and their families and their situation. What if there is that bigger picture for our churches? That's a good challenge. I know it's a challenge for me because I'm way more comfortable dealing with church folk. I go out of my comfort zone and go to where people who need Jesus actually are. I am uncomfortable. Maybe you are too. That doesn't excuse us from the work, does it? And there's still much to be done. And I think we can do it. Because if Jesus could change Zaccheus' life, he could change anyone's. Shucks, if he can change my life, he can change anyone's. How about we try that? How about we trust that if we take Jesus to where the people are, things are going to happen. And we'll let all the legalisms of the church creeds and stuff work themselves out by and by. Zaccheus was a man living on the edge whose life was off track. And once again, he's another story of encountering Jesus and getting his life back on track.